What's up, guys? This is Tom Fazio coming at you with another edition of what I'm calling dice theory, let's say. Those of you that have been with the channel for a while know that I tend to focus on peak performance, mind-body development, a little bit of martial arts. And so this is a bit of a derivation from that. It is related, and hopefully that will come out over the course of the video. But I'm doing a bit of a series here on, we could call them cognitive biases, we could call them frameworks and things that deal with predictive modeling. It's a lot cooler than that sounds, but bear with me a little bit. The topic of this particular video is going to look at what I'm calling the stupidity problem. So, the stupidity problem. In some of the other videos, the first video in this series, I talked about the uncertainty problem, which is very simply put that we can't predict the future, and yet most of us live as if we can, right? We've got 2, 3, 5-year plans looking ahead. We're pursuing degrees. We're planning for retirement. We're, depending on your age, we're looking at all these different things that are long-term, have long-term visions. And the assumption underlying them is that we have some control over the way events will play out and be able to generate certain types of outcomes with certain types of actions. In the book that I will be releasing shortly here, Law of the Die, I explore why that assumption may be wholly false, and it has a lot to do with the complexity of reality, of underlying, base reality, the number of variables in reality, and our ability to essentially identify meaningful factors, which I think is terribly speculative. I don't think we're good at it. I don't think there's any evidence, and there have been plenty of tests and research done with our ability to kind of extract meaningful variables and look at probabilistic outcomes just using our brains, and we suck at it. In general, we suck at it. And so the nature of this video, the stupidity problem, is looking at this issue of, okay, so maybe you grant me the fact that we're not very good at predicting the future and creating models of ways to live, and that could include business narratives, personal narratives. It could include planning in all domains, marriage, religion, even in martial arts. We tend to think that we can model these things, practice certain elements, and then, improve the way that we perform in life. And there are domains where we can do that, and there are domains where we can't, and the life issue is one where I don't believe we can do that very effectively. I think that most of what happens in life that we tend to feel like is a benefit to us has not been planned, it hasn't been orchestrated, it's because of a complex series of events that are underneath the surface of our perception. And that is not to say something that is absolutely true about objective reality. It doesn't mean that randomness is wholly accurate. It just means that from the perspective of the actor, the subject, in their own lives, we have very little insight into how things work. Yeah? So, anyway, if you can grant me that, and the next question is, well, then how do we implement more things in life to try to increase relationship situations, scenarios that will hopefully put us in positions of good luck, right? So that things pan out more to our favor than against us. How do we capitalize on randomness for good luck rather than for bad? And so I've covered this question and why we should do this in a few of the other videos. But one of the problems and one of the best critiques of this is that, but what if introducing randomness into our life creates a lot of hardship or pain and suffering, which is absolutely possible, because after all, those things have probably been the leading cause of pain and suffering thus far, right? The more volatility and unpredictability we add into our lives, the more likely it is that we're going to, collapse under the pressure, right? I mean, this is the leading cause of anxiety and depression and these things, that we've got very little control in our lives, and we don't seem to be able to dissect it, model it, and make changes for the better. Right? Which brings us to the stupidity problem, which is pretty simply laid out that not everybody learns from their mistakes. And this is twofold. On the one hand, it might have something to do with legitimate intelligence, and on the other side, it might have something to do with people taking on risks and challenges that vastly exceed their level of competency. So in the delusion problem, I'll talk a little bit about what's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is how many of us tend to overestimate our ability to perform in certain domains because we don't have enough information or enough knowledge in that domain to know that we can't perform. This is a big problem across the board, but it leads to a lot of people taking on risks so big that they can't, learn from. And in some cases, they die, right? So one of the best examples of this, if you guys haven't heard of the Darwin Awards, which I think is, their tagline is something like, they're awarding people with the Darwin Award who are contributing to the human genome by removing themselves from it through stupid acts, right? And I think it was in 2017. Let me double check that real quick. Right, so in 2018, this one made international news. There was this Christian missionary who went to the island of, I believe it was called Sentinel. And, he wanted to spread the gospel and save those savages. These guys, this is a tribe that has something like 60,000 years of history on this island. They're extremely isolated. And yeah, I think the last time they had interaction with foreigners was something like, 200 years prior. And it was an attempted kind of British occupation, and it was disastrous. Because of that, they lost faith in foreigners across the board, and so this guy is essentially deciding to go in, young kid, and transform those pagans. So he does so, and I think that he brings three things, right? He's got like a soccer ball, a pair of scissors, and Jesus. How he determined these three would be the things to do whatever job he was after, and I don't think anybody knows, but he rented a kayak. Against all admonitions, he decided to do this alone, rowed his boat over to the island. As soon as he got off and got on the island, he was attacked with arrows. A noose was put around his neck, and he was dragged across the beach. I'm not exactly sure how he died, but probably had something to do with getting shot by arrows and hung. And yeah, so nobody knows if the tribe learned to play soccer after that. But this was a stupid thing to do. On all accounts, it was a stupid thing to do, and a great thing to be awarded for. The Darwin Awards in this case, it was so stupid and naive. But it's a great case in point that this we could largely consider an act that would deviate from most standards in life. It's not something that people do on a regular basis. And he was taking a massive risk. And there was no basis from which to measure the degree of risk that he was taking on. So in Law of the Die, and when I'm talking about some of these, dice theory principles, we do need to qualify it to a certain extent because there are ways of introducing randomness that are smarter than others, right? And this is not a great idea for one particular reason, which is that what we're looking for fundamentally when we introduce random things in life is a positive payoff curve, right? And what I mean by that is the risks that we take are relatively low or inconsequential. Right? They may not cost anything for that matter, but maybe 10 minutes of time, right? A little bit of time, a little bit of money, we don't know. Just stepping outside of your comfort zone, taking a different way home from work, doing something that you don't normally do to expose yourself to a little bit more volatility, variety, but it's not going to hurt you that much. On the other hand, you might be doing something that adds a great deal of upside. So that 10 minutes of your day might be asking an acquaintance if they can contact you with an investor, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're having trouble with your relationship or your marriage, it might be taking 10 minutes to call and set up an appointment with a coach or a psychiatrist. There's a number of ways that you can create untold upside without a lot of risk, right? This example of the missionary here, the soccer ball missionary, is an example of a lopsided payoff curve, meaning the upside that he was after. If you can quantify it for me, please do. I can't do it. Maybe the upside is he thinks he's going to save a whole village full of pagans. I don't really know. But there was a lot of risk, and there were known risks that these guys were a hostile tribe, and for good reason, right? The downside of this equation, we know, it was death, right? I mean, So the upside, okay, big question mark. We don't know how much of an impact he's going to have. We don't know what he's going to get out of it, what the tribe's going to get out of it. But the downside is death. It's a lesson you get to learn once. This is not a good example of a type of risk to take. Another great example. In 2017, there was a guy, I think this was in India, magician of sorts, spiritual magician, known for doing feats of, mystic magic and the whatnot. Older guy, 68 years old, and he won the descriptor, and this was also a Darwin Award, won the descriptor steamy buns. Why steamy buns, you might ask? Well, this genius decided to fry himself in an enclosed wok next to rice, corn, and some vegetarian buns, as if it wasn't enough to do it alone. So yeah, he put himself in this wok. A few minutes later, people heard some knocking and pounding from the inside, and by the time they opened the wok lid, Mr. Steamy Buns was unconscious and so, fatally injured that he did not recover from this incident. And yeah, nobody knows if the corn was finished. So this is another great example of a lopsided payoff curve. The upside of doing this trick well, who knows how many people were in audience? I'm guessing it was probably less than 50, though it might have been more if this got a lot of acclaim. So maybe you inspire 50 people and prove that you are the shit at magician. The shit at magic, at being a magician. The downside, certain death. What the fuck? I mean, this is not the type of, this is like somebody that wants to do cliff diving in a place that they have never scouted, are not an experienced cliff diver, don't know the depth of the water, are not sure how many jagged rocks are beneath them, are not even sure maybe they can clear the face of the rock face that's underneath them. This kind of stuff happens. And so the upside, you impress friends, maybe you get a little bit of an adrenaline rush. The downside is certain death. This is an example of the type of randomness that I would not encourage anybody to take on, right? Downside absolute, upside big fat question mark. We don't know. So getting back to our original problem, the stupidity problem, this, in my opinion, is it's a problem with stupidity, right? We're not looking at payoff in the right kinds of ways. And we're not, in particular, putting ourselves, I've never steamed myself in a giant wok or, gone to a deserted island with nothing but a tribe of hostile individuals. But these guys are not putting themselves in positions to learn from their mistakes. And this is a critical point, right? On the one hand, we need to be taking risks. We need to introduce randomness. On the other hand, we need to be putting ourselves in position where we can actually learn and grow from these experiences, where there is upside potential, where the downside is low, but if we fail, it's not going to kill us. Doing these videos is a good example. What's the upside of putting a video out into the world? Well, I may be able to connect with somebody that is interested in these ideas. We may have a conversation. It may help somebody in some way, right? A lot of the content that I put out, some of it I hope is motivational, some of the old martial arts demos and some of the new stuff, I hope will speak to people that might need these concepts in the way that I did when I was 20 years old, right? It's taken me a long time to try to investigate and understand these things for myself. And they're not so easy to access, not so easy to understand. At least they weren't for me for a long time. But they've helped me, and I hope they help other people. That's a lot of upside. The downside, maybe I produce some shit content. Is that going to kill me? No. I might get a few negative comments on the videos. I might be a little bit misunderstood, and that's my downside, right? In worst case scenario, I have to delete the video down the road. Worst case scenario, I get a few downvotes on a video, but these are not things that are going to kill me. On the other side, I am testing a hypothesis, which is that there are other people in the world that care about this shit and that might benefit, and it's a fun conversation to have. So, I'll put this out, and again, some of these topics are going to come back in a video that I will call the delusion problem, so look for that. But We can contrast this with a guy named Alex Honnold, who some of you guys may be familiar with. Tons of mosquitoes around me. Sorry for my twitchiness. Vietnam. Alex Honnold, the first guy to free solo El Capitan. Free solo means you are climbing a giant rock face. I believe it was about 400 meters. Let me double check that. 1,000 meters. 1,000 meters of granite rock face. There's a documentary about the guy. I would highly recommend you watch it. He is an absolute inspiration. He did something that I think that we could honestly claim nobody on earth could do but him. The best climbers in the world, some of them were filming him, and some of them were standing down at the base of the rock face looking up and in tears because they thought this would be the last time they ever see their friend. And so by all accounts, we could say that this, for most of us, would be a lopsided payoff curve. It's an example of something that has dire consequences, absolute certain death is the consequence, upside, giant question mark, right? However, we're dealing with a guy who's had probably hundreds of free solo experiences in a lot of different arenas. He's climbed El Capitan many, many times with ropes and harnesses and guides. So he knew his stuff, right? And he was a craftsman of the highest order. He lived this life of climbing. One of the best climbers in the world, if not the best, hands down, right? So when he accomplished this, what we were witnessing was not in the same category as these other guys. What we were witnessing is a true craftsman of the highest order performing his craft. And so this gives us another lesson, a heuristic of sorts that is extremely valuable, I think, which is that skill tempers risk. And so there are ways of looking at the stupidity problem. We could call it levels or grades to this conversation, right? So the more skill somebody has, the less risky it is for them to perform something. Although it might mean certain death for you or I or literally anybody else on the planet. For Alex Honnold, it was probably not an unreasonable step to take or action to take given his level of skill in that domain. We don't really know, right? He could have fallen, he still could have died. But the risk that he was taking on was not comparable to what the soccer ball missionary or Mr. Steamy Buns. Even though it certainly seems like the risk that Alex Honnold took was so much more severe than the other two. But he was a highly skilled craftsman. And so, to sum up this point of the stupidity problem, the big two takeaways, right? Skill tempers risk. If you want to take on things that you or somebody might consider risky in life, do your homework, right? Try to engage in it in small incremental steps where you can actually learn through the process. Don't expose yourself off the bat to something so extreme where death is given or death is certain, and the upside, big fat question mark. The other side of this equation is that in the game of randomness, in the game of taking on risk and rolling the dice, try to do so in small incremental manners, take smaller risks, and look for a positive payoff curve, right? So look to engage in things where you can learn from the process, and most importantly, with that learning, you're able to create a set of filters personalized to you. Right? So I might roll the dice 50 times, I might expose myself to a variety of domains, and I might realize after maybe a month or two that, half the stuff that I'm doing has no positive return. I'm not learning that much from doing it, and in such a way, I'm able to filter out the types of domains and the types of things that I'm doing, types of risks that I'm taking, that don't provide much upside, right? You can learn this over time and then start to focus on those domains and experiences that actually give some form of return. So that's it for this video, guys. Hopefully you've liked it. If you have, please like, subscribe, and until the next video, be weightless.